Yeah, I never really uh considered myself too much of an artist, certainly not a visual artist. I've been I studied journalism. I've been a writer and an editor for a long time, so that's mainly where my artistic pursuits have been. Um, but I love art. I like to make art. I've always liked to make art, even though I've never felt it was particularly good. Um, and I've just I grew up in the 90s, playing NES, Super NES games. So that style of pixel art really always, it's like deep, deep ingrained in my brain, and I've always really loved that. So, uh, yeah, I think they're kind of two worlds colliding that I never really expected. It kind of came out of nowhere. I got into crypto. Just I've always been interested in tech, and really, you know, was late to the game. I guess I uh, should go back and see when I really started. I was there sort of at the when I got into crypto was sort of just before I got into Basepaint, just around the start of Basepaint, and I was just looking for different things, just exploring the space, seeing what was out there, and definitely some financial motivation. Is seeing like how are all these people making all this money? What is this about? How is that happening? And uh, yeah, I got totally grabbed by it. I was like, oh, this is such an interesting concept. Like artists getting paid for their work in this direct way seems so cool. And um, the barrier to entry was so simple. I was like, yeah, okay, I can drop 20 pixels on a on a piece. I can drop 50 pixels on a piece, and I was so proud of that first uh, canvas. I think I really contributed to. It was one of the early, like in the 20s. I think the Pokemon canvas. I drew a little like a little badge, like a little Pokemon badge. I was like, okay, I could do this. This is possible. And then like seeing some small return out of that, it's like instantly hooked. So anyway, that's both those things were kind of swirling around and just like collided there, and I got hooked. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I can go back and see it. I'll take a second. And what was really there were a couple things. Uh, uh, I was just going back to see what yeah, the first project I really got involved with was a project called Prometheans, which Giancarlo Zhao was running, and it was an interesting like kind of NFT experiment. Like mint. Timer was running down, and depending when you minted on the timer, you'd mint an NFT, and then the timer would reset. It was going on for a long time, and he ran a newsletter for a while called Mint or Skip, where he highlighted different projects that were coming up. So that was really my first introduction, and I was just on crypto Twitter, just looking at things, and I had seen Base Paint, I think, get posted, here or there, and I was like, I don't know, looks interesting, but it didn't grab me initially. And then I saw Giancarlo in his newsletter post about it, and he was like, "This is a really interesting thing," and I was like, "Okay, I'll do the work to give it a shot." And I think it was. I mean, I guess I must have had to. That might have been the first time I bridged to base, even. Um, but there was that barrier where initially I was like, this is going to be a whole thing. You got to mint a brush, and but that second sort of hit, where you recommended it, really pushed me over the edge to be like, okay, I guess I'll give this a shot. I'll do the work to to try to get into it there. Yeah, I mean, it was both for sure. But uh, it just seemed like such a cool project. I think part of it is like, you know, the kinds of projects like Basepaint are so engaging to me. Like that's kind of, it felt very, I don't know, kind of nostalgic. I think sometimes about, I don't know if you know that project, Twitch Plays Pokemon. Do you remember that? It's a very cool project where like somebody had set up a system where depending on what inputs came in through the Twitch chat, it would send like the most inputted command through Twitch to a Pokemon console. And it was this huge collaborative project of like, can can the wisdom of the crowds like beat Pokemon? But it was this very cool, you know, it was like so niche, so weird, so like could only be a product of its particular time and in space. Um, and I don't know, those kinds of projects are so cool to me, and like I think it just, there's something about that also that really attracted me to base paint. And you know, it didn't seem uh, it also, like, the financial incentive around collecting didn't seem, you know, like, didn't seem like there was a ton there necessarily. And but the sort of like continual, just like you could paint and get paid for it, was like that was attractive to me too, for sure. No, and I no, they beat it. It happened. You know, it was really it was amazing. It was a really cool project. It kind of has a similar vibe, you know. It was like, you know, same kind of thing that happens in base paint, where you know, you log on, you're immediately like part of this sort of like stream of consciousness that's been happening since you logged off the last time. And you know, sometimes it's like, this is amazing, like we're all doing it together. And then sometimes you're like, what are you doing? Like, you're screwing up the project. And there are people in there, you know, explicitly to screw up the project, you know. And it's kind of a, you know, a battle for the the greater good, which sometimes base paint feels like, or especially in those early days did. And there were more, you know, people just there spamming or whatever. um, there's a little bit of that too, where it's like you actually have to like fight for the project for the best outcome, something like that. So there's just a you log in, it's like a stream of Pokemon. There's just the game, the, you know, the game screen. And I don't know how exactly they set it up, but it was basically every maybe 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds or something, some program they had set up, I believe, would look at the chat log and determine the most inputted command in the chat. So people would just be typing up, 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 or, you know, left, down, right, A, B. So it would take, you know, if there were 1,000 ups and only 200 downs, it would input up to the game. So play the whole game 5 seconds at a time. So there had to be some real coordination, especially, you know, like there's an area with a ledge you can't jump off. You know, if for one section of 5 seconds down wins, you're screwed. You got to start off at the beginning. So anyway, it's a very interesting experiment, but they did it. Yeah. So they finished. They did it. They won the game. They beat Pokemon in this method, and it was just, I mean, it's, you know, it's, the celebration was astounding. It's great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think about that, you know, with some frequency. And yeah, the parallels to base paint are not, you know, I think they're pretty clear. And it's just a cool, like, as you said, the um you know, it does just, it's like the perfect use case for this technology, or a perfect use case of it. And it's really cool to see that, you know, happen, you know, go, oh yes, of course, makes perfect sense. uh it's collaborative online pixel painting project where the painters, the artists, get paid based on their contributions. And it's an interesting, I remember we did a little, I feel like there have been iterations before of like, how do we describe this? How do we put this out to people? And like, I don't know. Do you talk about crypto? Do you not talk about crypto? I don't know. But it's, yeah, anyway. In one way, it is just a perfect use case of this technology. Like it shows off perfectly how uh, crypto technology can be of benefit to artists, be of benefit to people who are doing work, and it's like uh, and be compensated fairly. So, in one reason that it's important is it uh, illustrates that use case so perfectly. Um, it's also just I always come back to Basepaint as like it's a shining star. I think of the crypto ecosystem. It's just I don't think, especially at this point after this such a long period of time, like no one's there making it rich. No one's there trying to grift. If anyone was, they're gone now, or there's just not that much grift in it, and it's a wonderful community. It's a wonderful just like place where there's this intersection again of artists and crypto people who are interested in the technology. It's just such a great meeting place for all those different streams. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and that's too. I think like it's power. I can totally imagine some future state where um, base paint is even more hugely popular just because it has that appeal. Like you don't have to be into crypto to love base paint, and there are plenty of people who are into base paint who aren't. um, or like me or some others. I think like the entry gate can be crypto. Like you're really interested in the technology, you want to make $5 a day, like there it is, it's there for you. Yeah, 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 yeah. For me personally, the financial incentive, especially for painting, is like not enough to get me on, on the canvas most days, or it's not the primary motivator. And now I have a pretty big brush, I have a lot of pixels, but I don't I'm not plugged in enough, and I don't have the time enough to devote to even spend them all really. So um there it's nice because it has provided some flexibility. Not that I'm ever using it as like a primary income source, but there have been times in my life where I have had less work. I freelance a fair bit, so in times when I don't have a lot of work, it's really cool to be able to plug in and go, oh, I can actually spend an hour a day painting, thinking about art, and it wouldn't be a waste of my time. That's a good feeling. And it's tremendously cool that um, it's a worldwide project, right? Where like cost of living and annual income in various places is so variable, and that like even 100 pixel brush providing could provide some like actual substantive income is like, I mean, God, what another amazing use case there. It's very cool. And um, I think there's some really interesting, I don't know, I haven't explored this fully for myself or in my own mind, but there's a really interesting relationship too between the people who are collecting this art and the people who are artists. And there is a lot of overlap too. There's like um, certainly some number of the people who paint are collecting every day, but there are some people who really aren't, because to eat into your to your profits by paying the point $0.026 ETH, $5 to $10, that would be like a hit to your to your income, especially if you're coming off base paint. But so there's an interesting way in which some people are sort of subsidizing that work for other people, and some people are collecting. And I don't know, it's a very cool sort of symbiosis, I think. Yeah, that's another, like, there's probably a million answers to that. Um, and there's some financial motivation there too, that, like, I definitely have that too. I'm like looking, like, you love to see a rare piece, right? Like, oh, there's only 80 mints on this one. Is it going to be the new rarest piece? And because there could be a payout on the other end of that, and it goes through waves. Sometimes it's very popular, sometimes it's not, and there have been moments where there's been a real windfall. Like, I don't know, I might have the, like, highest base paint sale ever, or one of them. Like, sold a piece for uh, zero point 0.5, I think, at some point, zero point 0.5 ETH. So that was exciting, and I have a complete set, so I, like, see the value of that at some point. Um, but if you are looking at it on a short time frame, or with, like, people aren't buying these necessarily, not regularly. There's not a ton of volume. Um, maybe if your margins are small enough, maybe if you only want to make, 30-40 cents, there's some way to flip them there. But at this time, you're probably bag holding a lot of a lot of canvases that you can't sell. But on the other hand, you get to feel good about it too. Like, if you have the income to be able to spend on it, you're like directly supporting artists in a cool project. So I don't know. It's an interesting. I think about that sometimes, as every week or month, I'm like, what, am I gonna drop down another $50 to to collect every canvas this week? And I go, I guess I am. Yeah, for sure. Especially, that 5% discount adds up. But also, the times it always seems to be that, when I forget to mint a canvas, it's the rarest canvas. So I'm done with that. I'm a subscriber. I am. Yeah, I'm one of the full set collectors, which, yeah, feels cool. Yes, that's the one that has the, like, it's by year. It has, like, year one, year two. Yeah, I think I saw the beta version of that. I don't know if I seen it when it went live, but very cool tool. Is really cool to visualize all those. But yeah, and a lot of cool visualizations of, which canvases are where, and, like, yeah, anyway, it's a great tool. I'm looking forward to digging into that one more. Yeah, really cool. I mean, that's another cool thing. It's just like, especially as base paint gets bigger, just in terms of, the number of canvases that exist. I mean, kind of like nouns, too. It becomes its own thing. There's kind of like its own gravity to it, where it's like, I don't know, somebody who's a nerd, like most of us, can do, like, a data analysis on all this just because it's cool, and there's so many people in the space who are just interested from that perspective on it. Who are the holders of all these things? Like, it's really cool to just dig into that from a fun, like, nerdy technical perspective, I think. I mean, wow, I might be the worst person to give this definition. I mean, it's art made with pixels. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, yeah. So I'd probably give a bad, art school definition of it. But the way I think of it, or the way that it's impactful to me, is like, really, I mean, thinking about minimalism, I think. And I've had periods of working, like, doing some more intensive pixel art. I got into it through base paint, and then I did some other pixel art work, and was interested in doing animation. And actually, I worked on some of uh, the base paint masterpieces projects that we were doing every 100 canvases or so, and learning about the craft some from some of the amazing artists on the project. But to me, I'm really interested in minimalism. I like that as a concept and as an art form, and just like, with pixel art, every pixel matters. The smallest amount of what you can put on there makes a huge impact. So to me, it's really like, what how much can you do with how little, or given these constraints, um, what can you do? It's almost like a, like visual haiku a little bit, like, uh, what can you do with just this? Here's just this. What can you make out of it? Which is very, very intriguing to me. Yeah, I think I was there at Canvas 22, and yeah, it's like, uh, it's really fun to look back at those. Look back through the whole history. You can see like these different periods of change, and those early canvases really were like such examples of, the like plop, just like everyone's dropping whatever they want wherever. And partially there were a lot more brushes, a lot more small brushes, probably fewer large brushes. So everyone was like, I'm going to put my 100 pixels wherever I want. People weren't necessarily looking at the chat, right? They're just like, drop it. And now a whole culture has evolved around it, where it's like, you know read the chat, check in with people, don't so, communication is key. We've developed those sort of uh not rules, but those, as a community, we've talked about those things, community standards almost, that have evolved kind of naturally. But anyway, the in the beginning, yeah, it was very haphazard. It was very like, drop everything everywhere. There's some talking in the chat that was pretty haphazard too. That was part of the fun of it too. I think it was kind of like, it was kind of Wild West, and it was like, but it was also like, it was an exciting challenge to be like, with 100 pixels, can you actually add to this in a way that isn't just dropping something randomly somewhere? Can you actually contribute to this? And I don't know. I think at first, I didn't have any grand vision. At first, it really was just like, this is cool. This is interesting. Can I drop 100 pixels somewhere? And especially as a, like somebody without an artistic background, it was a manageable piece, which was nice. It was like, yeah, I can add for a while, I was like, I can add an outline to something, right? Or like, I can add some shadowing. For a long time too, we were like making sure to keep the number in every canvas. So I was like, okay, I could put the number in there somewhere. It was a manageable chunk for me. And it's such an engaging project. I think almost everyone who engages with it is like, this is cool. It's captivating in some way. So, and the community was just great. It was just like a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. It's fun to be in the chat with these cool people, like talking about it. And there's kind of there's the immediate artistic level. There's the like meta level of like, what are we trying to do with this canvas? So there's all sorts of ways you can plug in, and it all was interesting to me, I think. So it's just fun to keep going along. And there was a huge, also, like, it really was really like validating, and like felt like such an achievement, like getting upgraded from like 100 pixels to 200 pixels. I felt like, wow, this is awesome. Like somebody saw my work and thought it was okay, like thought it was okay enough to trust me a little more. And that was really, I don't know, it was really validating. It was really cool. I felt really good about that. Still feel good about that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that uh evolved sort of slowly. Again, there are a bunch of reasons. One, at some point, it used to be anyone can mint a brush and just paint. And I think it was a 100 pixel brush. It wasn't limited. Um, Now it's a little, you meant like a trial brush. It doesn't last forever. And so part of it was that it was like when the brush access is a little more controlled, then you you know, it's not just any random person coming in on the canvas. So there's like a sort of a smaller set of artists um, who may have been given some instruction a little bit about like, hey, check in with the chat, or just that kind of instruction. And there was a real push by a number of people to try to see something a little more coordinated. We used to um, have like a list of like best practices, kind of, I think, and someone would like make sure to post that regularly in the chat things, and it was instructions like, hey, don't like randomly erase someone's work. Check in with the chat, different stuff. So those kinds of things again became sort of like community standard. There were definitely like a lot of people who were leading that effort, like Jude and other people who wanted to see a more coordinated canvas and were pushing towards it. And just as you have more people with bigger brushes who are on board with that, they can direct it a little more. So I think there's some amount of that. It's like, uh, you know, Zach and Winter were able to identify, some co-collaborators, some people who wanted to push the project in the way they wanted to see it go. If you give those people 5,000 pixel brushes, they can push things in a way, which is good. And I think also it just sort of naturally evolved that way too. Like at the beginning, it's kind of wild and crazy. Everyone's figuring it out. And then people get bored with that, right? It's like, you want to see something different. You want to see like, oh, what can we do? And, sometimes it reverts, like we paint this amazing canvas, then it's like Plop City, the next one. And I think just over the years too, as the canon, or as the oeuvre of canvases, as the number of canvases expands, you can point back. You can be like, let's do it like that, or like this. Remember when we did that amazing work? Like, let's try to do something like that. And it allows you to, sort of drive the train a little bit. And then, of course, moving to the larger canvas was a big change too, and that I think allowed in a lot of ways for, especially larger brushes and people with sort of an expansive vision to say like, this is the vision. We've moved now to more of a like if you propose the theme, often you're invited to give some input, and it often includes reference images. Like you want to have a like the tattoo canvas. Like you want to do the tattoo canvas. Find a couple pictures of something that you want the canvas to look like, and people can work off that. So there are a lot of ways that we've moved towards making more cohesive canvases, and those are some of them. And it still doesn't always work out that way, but it's definitely interesting. Yeah, it does feel. I mean, it feels very collaborative in that way, and I think, yeah, I'd be interested to hear. I will be interested to hear how Zach and Winter think about it too. But it really feels like it's, it never felt like they had a heavy hand in it, but it feels even more now. I think like the heavy hitters like Jude and Creamy and people are really, they're taking a lead on it, which is cool. I have a little bit, and I think it's so cool. Like I've done a little, I did one of the Basepaint masterpieces that was animations, and there was another pixel art project where they were soliciting submissions for animations. So I tried it. I was like, this would be cool. I want to see if I can do this. And God, it's a real push. It's hard. So I usually don't I usually don't attempt it on the canvas. I've done it a few different times, but it's just such a lift for my brain. It's it's such work that I usually am like, I stay away. But yeah, I like, it's so cool when you see it, especially, when you see those clips, somebody clips it, puts it on Twitter, you're like, oh, that is awesome. I should do that. But and it's just, there are people who are such masters of that. It's I mean, it's amazing to watch them work. Part of it that's cool too is it's like it's both the artistic and the technical, again, meeting where it's like, yeah, you can understand how it's got to work visually, but also you got to get the saves in there at the time, that makes sense. And it's a real art. I haven't heard that rumor. It's like a doomsday prophecy. No, I don't think so. I mean, unless I think I think it's going to be whatever the community wants, like if the community felt like they were done with it and they wanted to sunset it, but that's not the feeling I get. I don't know. I haven't been very active, the past few months, just because my work ebbs and flows. But every time I drop into the chat, it seems so vibrant and active. I I find, I think there are people in there that are so diehard too. They're going to be base painting until you drag them off the canvas. Totally. Yeah, you can. I wonder sometimes. It's like the number of mints. It goes down. We've sort of hit a plateau around 100 now. There's usually about 100 mints a day on these over the past, I don't know, 6 months, something, year maybe. And it does ebb and flow with attention to the ecosystem. And there's discussion about why that is, or how we could change that or get more people involved. That's always the case. And I wonder sometimes, like, I don't know, is this thing going to go on forever? Who knows? Is it dying? Is it not dying? Uh, is it Does it make sense if it's just a couple of people, like painting a big base canvas? I don't know, but it feels like, for, I don't know, maybe always, really, it's been like on the edge, kind of hitting escape velocity. And like, I don't know, nouns is another. I don't know too much about the nouns ecosystem too, but I'm like, you could see a way in which it dies. You could see a way in which it goes on forever. Um, and so I mean, only time will tell, of course. But again, I think just because base paint is such a perfect use case, perfect like marrying of these things, it really feels like it could continue, forever. Sure. Yeah, um, I really would love to see more artists. I mean, there would be challenges if there were 10 times more artists or 100 times more artists, but ultimately I think that can only be positive. Like, those are challenges I would love to see us work through. um, Partially just because, like, that's more attention on the project. I think a lot of like where people collecting comes from is, they have an artist they're connected to or who they like, who's posting about it, who they get grabbed by. So it's, one way, it's just more surface area for people to be exposed to it. um, and it's just like that. It just directly drives money back to artists, and that's just like, how could that be bad? That's all good. And um, I think there's a lot of opportunities still for people who are artists who have no connection or interest in crypto to get onboarded here. And I know there's been some effort in that, but there's still, in crypto, there's still just barriers to that. that some of that has to do with the base paint architecture, but some of it's just the crypto architecture. I think that only gets easier over time, but um, I would love to see more ways to just get more people involved. I think that can only be a positive. I want to go back to the days of having to like yell at each other and chat about mistakenly erasing things. That's part of the fun too, I think, and it's all like people generally have a good humor about it too, and yeah, I think more people can only be better. Yeah, I think the the main challenge is just keeping it going, and keeping people interested. Like um, there's this real flywheel, right? Of like people people paint, um, they get compensated for painting, and there's some people who would be there whether they got paid or not. But there's some people who wouldn't. It's like it gets hard to devote 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours a day if it feels like you know if that's like your main artistic pursuit, that's great. If it's not, once it becomes a slog or a struggle, it becomes not worth it for people. So you could see how that if that flywheel keeps getting slower and slower, it could stop eventually. So that's the danger, I think. But as long as people are interested, as long as that keeps going, then there's the sky's the limit. Could keep going. I think the challenge is really just keeping the attention there, even if it's small. It's not like it's a niche community for sure, but keeping the word out there, just like keeping it alive, keeping people interested is is the challenge, I think. As far as changes, I don't know. Nothing leaps to mind. I feel like Zach and Winter are always like thinking of cool stuff, implementing little changes, and I don't think there's any glaring like this needs to change. I think whatever they can do and whatever we can do to like keep it fresh and updated and working and keep those like the on ramp to base paint as smooth as possible. Any improvements there are really going to help, but it's in a pretty good spot. I hope it keeps going forever, and I really like I people are always screaming about like their project should be highlighted by base, highlighted by by the powers that be. Um, so you know, I think that for base paint, you know, I I, I really do feel like you know I really do feel like it's a shining jewel, both of base, but also of just like crypto in general. Um, there's always a hope that everybody sees that at some point. And there is something too, like the longer it goes on, the more it becomes unavoidable. Like, if there are 10,000 base paint canvases, how can you have a conversation about base without talking about base paint, Um, so, I think my hope and dream is that like base paint is a household name, or at least a crypto Twitter household name. um, and I really like the collecting aspect of it. Maybe it's a little fraught too because it feels like that's more like um, financial incentive or something. um, but it's also just it's just cool. Like that's a I think a lot of people in crypto, I think a lot of artists too, like have a um, interest in collecting. There's something about it. I haven't fully explored that in my own mind either, but it's it's a cool part of it. It's part of it, um, and I'd love to see more people interested in that. Um, yeah, I don't know what that means, but but it's a cool part of it. And like the tool, I can't remember now the what's the name of the tool that yeah. Yeah, so there are tools like Basepaint Market and other things that have, yes, thank you. That no, I guess yeah, completer or completor. That now I can't remember who made that. Anyway, Taylor, yes, thank you. So yeah, so Taylor made the completor, site, and there are tools that come up or interesting looks from time to time at the um, collection side of it, and I think those are cool to explore too. So I like diving into that. I also I feel bad because I have I've been not super involved for the past couple months, painting regularly, so I'm blanking on names now, but I'm like so appreciative of the people who are there like every day plugging in. Um, but Creamy and Jude, of course, like come to mind immediately, and like forever grateful to them for their work in keeping this thing going. I don't know if it would be going without them. Um, but I had the pleasure and the honor in working on some of the masterpiece collections, and that group of people, like Ticklish, 8-Bit Mortal, Spacefish, Quet, Jude, like I kind of got thrown in there because I've been around forever and like, I've contributed and I'm like a collector, but I'm not a tenth of the artists. I'm certainly not half of the artists those guys are. Um, and they were just so helpful in me, like bringing my, I was like, is this okay? Like, does this work? And they were like, sometimes they were like, yeah, that's good. And I was like, oh. And sometimes they were like, man, you got to fix all of this. And I was like, okay, it was like a hard pill to swallow, but I was like, okay. And, they're, uh, I feel like all those people are just so um, generous with their time, really. Just like, you know, they they love pixel art and they want to see good pixel art, right? And they're happy to hold your hand through it, and they're like so. I feel like there's still some amount of like people are just so happy when you reach out and chat because you're not like dropping whatever on the canvas. Like if you reach out on chat and you're like, how do I do this? Where would it be good to plug in? Like, does this look good? Would it look better like this? Like people are so happy to talk about that stuff, and it's really generous. I really really appreciate it.